Been doing a lot more work on Component.Studio 2, and I have a ton of new things to show you. Keep in mind, again, this is just a playground, not a real app. We're still a long ways away from a real app. Also, I want feedback on literally everything I'm talking about here. So if you don't like something, tell me. And now's the time to do it, so I don't have to go back and redo it after it's really baked into the app. I've got a lot to cover. I'm going to go pretty quickly. But, feel free to talk in the comments if you want me to cover something in more depth. Okay, so the first thing is I've got a little recalc button here. You don't really have to know much about it other than if you think that your templates have been out of sync, your layers are out of sync with the visual interpretation, you can hit recalc and it'll do that. It should never happen. Well, there are some circumstances that are complicated that'll happen, but anyway, in general, shouldn't be a problem. Download lets you download basically an image of what you're seeing. So if I click on that, it should bring it down here. There we go. I have downloaded the current thing that I am drawing on. Zoom is a much requested feature from old school Component Studio. Basically, we always show a shrunk down version, whatever will fit your screen. In Component Studio 1. That's not the case here. We're going to show it to you full size. If you're, you can shrink it down further though. So if you want it to fit in the screen, you can do that. But it's going to be at 100% zoom by default. I'm not going to increase zoom because it'll actually use up a lot more browser resources, and on slower machines it'll make them crash. So I don't want to make it go above 100%, but we've at least got that. So if you're working on a document that's really big, it will scroll in this thing. So I'm just going to slide this over here, for example. So now you can see it's scrolling within that area. And that accommodates both something that's larger than can fit in this space and also just the size of your browser. Let's see. We've got... you can move layers and groups now. So for example, I could take this default group here and move it to the top. And what that does is, of course, layers the items in that group above the layers below it. So this is something that's different from what I showed before. The layers you would work from top to bottom, and that's how Component Studio 1 works. But visually, everything comes from bottom to top. So I've just linked these two up now so that what's on the bottom here is on the bottom over there. It's basically exactly how Photoshop and Illustrator and other programs like that work. So hopefully that's a good change. You can do the same thing with individual. I'm going to put this one back down to the bottom here. Did I not hit it? Uh-oh. Something must be broken. Oh, well, let's reload here. I'll have to get that fixed. This is a playground after all. So anyway, you can do the same thing with individual layers, moving them up and down. You've got all these different options for controlling that. So this replaces the old sequence number that was in Component Studio 1. We also have labeling, we also have a new templating language that I'm working on. And so let's go in and have a look at that quick. So you can, of course, come in here and just type in a value. You can use the slider and that sort of stuff to get your values. But you can also use variables just like in Component Studio 1. So for example, in this case, we're working on the X value here. If I wanted to, I could... I can use a variable like, for example, a lot of people would want to center on X. So for that, I would go to Layer and Center X, and then I could paste that value in here. And you see that the system automatically calculates where center is because of this variable. So now that is centered along X. One of the things I wanted to ask about is I'm going to put all the functions for the first time into Component Studio 2. You'd had to just memorize them or look them up on the help page before. So you'll still have the help page. It's still going to be there showing all kinds of examples and that sort of stuff. But for just day-to-day use, I thought it might be useful to have them here as variables almost. as a selector. My question is, though, how should this be labeled? Should this say absolute value rather than ABS? The function is going to be called ABS just to keep it short for typing purposes. And I put in a value in here that would make it work. So absolute value means whether it is a positive or negative number, make it a positive number. So if I have this calculate here, now you've got, the calculated value is 30 of absolute value. So should this say absolute value? Should this say what I'm going to paste in here? Should this just be the function name like it is now? I'm also putting in some mathematical variables that are useful, like pi, for example, is something that, apparently I don't have that working yet. But anyway, it's something that can be used for various purposes. Especially when you're calculating degrees and things like that. But anyway, I'm going to put that sort of stuff in. I just want to know how it should be formatted, what makes the most sense to you. The templating language looks a little different than the other one as well. So in the old one, you would do something like center me x, like so. In the new one, you no longer have this sigil. That's what this is called, this $sign here, for a variable. Instead, variables will be formatted so that and you wouldn't have, like in the old one, you'd have P for a project variable, something like that. You won't have that anymore. We instead, we're using double braces instead of single braces. There are a bunch of technical reasons for that, but it's going to be helpful for a lot of things. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Or in a future video, I should say. And we're prefixing everything with a real name so that it makes sense. So I'm pulling this from the layer. I could get the width of the overall design. So in this case, we're dealing with a poker card, so I could paste in the width of the design, and now putting that into the position, the X position, isn't exactly useful. Let's put this at 0, and then we'll go over here to the width and put in the width of the design. There we go. That's more useful. Anyway, so you've got, it's design.width. That should make it a little bit easier for people to understand what they're looking at when they're looking at these formulas. And because we have a much bigger area for formulas, I don't feel bad about having those names be much more descriptive. But anyway, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the early version of the templating language. And the last thing that I want to show you today is that I've also built in color names. So just like Component.Studio 1, you can now type in any color name that is a valid CSS color name. There's a whole list of them out there, but so I could just type in brown, for example, and it knows what brown is as far as cascading style sheets or CSS is, which is what styles the web. So you can use names like that. You can use if you know the character codes, you can just type those in. So you could say something like black is 6 zeros. And again, this is translucent, so it's showing like gray there, but it's because it's looking through it. If it was at 100% opacity, this wouldn't be a problem. And it's not the color that's set that way. It is actually the whole layer is set to 50% opacity. So if we're looking at that, and you can also use 3-letter character codes for those of you who are HTML people and know you can do shortcuts. So you can do like stuff like this and get yourself a character code. Oops, I need to do that. Oh, it's still not working right. All right, I'll have to get that fixed. That will work as well. Okay, so that's that. Oh, there is one last thing I should show. and that is group position. This was a requested feature from the last video. People said that they wanted to be able to move an entire group together. Now, groups cannot use variables, so this is just a hard coding exercise, but you can take all of the elements, so in this case the black, blue, and orange squares that I've got here, and you can actually move them accordingly. So I can say 30, and they will all move together 30 extra pixels to the right. And I could say 200, and they will all move together 200 pixels down. So that's what group position does. Again, no variables in there, but at least you can move the entire group together as a group. So that's it. Let me know what you're thinking. I'd love to hear your feedback.